every year that you violate the 4% rule, the mathematical likelihood that your money will last through life expectancy starts to drop like a rock.
But I have a section about the 4% rule, and I kind of say the 4% rule is bull, with another little tag on it. Because the risk of the 4% rule is that, first of all, there's market conditions that may not live up to supporting the 4% rule. But on $1 million, 4% is $40,000 pre-tax, and that may limit you on the lifestyle that you might want during retirement. So you might limit yourself in the beginning because the curve is usually, you spend more, it dips down, and then we spend more later during the later years for medical costs. And that big jump in the beginning is, every day is Saturday and you want to travel and there's things you want to do. And if suddenly you're limiting yourself to just a 4% withdrawal or so the Vanguard came out, they've adjusted it a few times, but I remember reading 3.25, 2.75. The CFP board at one time had published 3.25. These are kind of arbitrary numbers based on expected rates of return instead of individual needs. And in my opinion, your withdrawal strategy should be based on your individual needs, not dismissing the risks involved in that. That should be part of the plan, and then the plan should be reviewed every year.
One thing people forget about the 4% rule is the 4% rule. If that's how you're going to sort of ensure that your money lasts as long as you do, you got to remember the 4% rule is a pretty jealous master. People have a hard time sticking to 4% over 5 years, let alone a 30-year period. You got to remember that if you are going to live by the 4% rule, that means you got $1 million. That first year you can take out $40,000. The second year you can take out $40,000 plus 3%, which is $41,200. And you can continue on that wise for the next 30 years. Well, guess what? What happens if in any of those years you decide to take out 6% or 7%, drop back down to 4%, go back up to 5%, up to 7, maybe 8, back down to 4? Every year that you violate the 4% rule, the mathematical likelihood that your money will last through life expectancy starts to drop like a rock. And so you have to have the Zen-like precision to be able to, Zen-like discipline to be able to follow the 4% rule. And so it's a jealous master. If you're going to live by the 4% rule, you got to really live by it, or you're not going to have that mathematical assurance that your money is going to last through your actuarial life expectancy.
You can't do these things in a vacuum. You can't do it based on the 4% rule or the 3% rule, or if you're Dave Ramsey, the 8% rule, or 13%. Didn't he throw a 13 out there at one point?
I'm sure he has at some point. I don't know.
But it's based on, your investment decisions should be based on your financial plan. Your financial plan should be comprehensive. There should be a comprehensive process for it. It's not just a the tag word or a keyword, a comprehensive financial planning, and it should be done every single year. You should go through it every single year. So we also talked about, another thing we talked about was longevity risk. So that rolls right into this conversation.
Yeah, longevity risk, according to Tom Hegna, who is one of the leading, he's one of the brightest stars in the retirement planning constellation in our industry. He's been one of the leading advocates for using guaranteed lifetime income as the most cost efficient way to sort of mitigate longevity risk and sort of purge it from your retirement picture. The thing that's sticky about longevity risk, and longevity risk is basically the risk that you'll outlive your money, right? That's that you'll live too long and die broke. The issue with longevity risk is it's what we call a risk magnifier or a risk amplifier. The longer you live, the more likely you will succumb to an array of other risks that, if not addressed, will sort of send you to the poorhouse 10, 15, even 20 years prior to when you had ever anticipated. So, these are things like sequence of return risk, withdrawal rate risk, inflation risk, long-term care risk. If you really do a deep dive on each one of those risks, you'll see that the longer you live, you either amplify the likelihood of succumbing to one of those risks, or you amplify the consequences of succumbing to those risks. And so, so the question is, what is the best, most cost-effective way to purge longevity risk from your retirement picture. If that is indeed, I mean, survey after survey, Mark, has shown that the number one fear people have in retirement is outliving their money. So if you ask people, they will tell you without maybe quantifying it or articulating it in precisely this way, they'll say that longevity risk is their primary concern in retirement, and without even realizing that it is a risk amplifier, it is a risk magnifier, because the longer you live, the more likely you will have a long-term care event, the more likely you will succumb to inflation, the more likely you will, or the greater price you'll pay for taking an inordinately high withdrawal rate, or having sequence of return risk sort of turn your world upside down in retirement. So really the question is, how do you purge longevity risk from your retirement picture in the most cost-effective way? Well, we've talked about the 4% rule. It's literally the most expensive way to purge longevity risk from your retirement portfolio, because if you need $40,000 day one of retirement, you will need to have saved $1 million by day one of retirement. And so, Mark, you and I talk about there's more cost-effective ways. And, there's that four-letter word that Ken Fisher doesn't want you to hear about, and that's an annuity. Annuity is basically just a guaranteed stream of lifetime income that's guaranteed to last as long as you do. As long as you're on this side of the grass, you're going to have to keep receiving those checks and keep finding ways to try to spend the money. And so if you look at it, it's actually much more cost-effective to put money into an annuity and have the annuity generate that $40,000 than to save $1 million in the stock market. And so, unfortunately, annuities get a really bad rap because of the likes of Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey, and even Clark Howard, Ramit Sethi, Ken Fisher. But the issue is, hey, if it takes me $1 million to generate $40,000 of income under the Ken Fisher way, but I can generate that same amount of income for, say, $675,000, that's going to ebb and flow based on interest rates, but say $675,000 to generate that same $40,000 of income, and it's going to be guaranteed to last my entire life, then that frees up an extra $325,000 with which I can do some really interesting things. I get some long-term care, put it into my discretionary fund, take an extra trip around the world, take the kids to Disney World, what have you.
Yeah, I was having a conversation today. So we have one of our, somebody who joined our team last year is a certified financial planner, and he worked at Vanguard for 11 years. And they had some exposure to annuities, but not much. So that's one of his things that he's learning, and he's doing quite well. But we had a conversation just this morning about it, and he was, and we were just talking about the details of it. And the ones that annuities we tend to use have a level of principal protection or principal protection. And that's very, very important. But I would say that equally, if not more important, is the offset of that longevity risk, especially some of these platforms, the multiples that you get on your money. I don't know how you can do that on your own or in any other strategy, right? Because you get this either guaranteed growth rate or an inflated amount of growth rate every year, depending on the index return that you receive. So I'm trying to be very, very general here, but then when you start this withdrawal strategy, even if your portfolio draws down to very low or zero, which it would do probably in an ETF or a mutual fund, you continue to get these withdrawals. And even if you started at the same withdrawal rate, let's use the 4%, if you start at the same withdrawal rate, and then that portfolio drew down and you're still getting that $40,000 a year, and then it comes down to $40,000 and you're still getting that $40,000 a year, well, that's a pretty fantastic withdrawal rate. And then when it goes down to zero, you're still getting that $40,000 a year. Tell me where you can compete with that. And that was, I probably shared this with you and to other viewers in previous webinars, but there was a time when I was at Payne Weber and UBS, same company, they just merged or one bought out the other. I probably spent 5 years in my early time as a financial advisor railing against annuities because of all the things that I heard out there until I did my own research. And I learned at the time that, long story short, that the platforms that UBS were really pushing us to put people in, compared to annuities that were out there offering, that had zero guarantees, and the platforms UBS was pushing, and they cost about a half a point more than the annuities that were out there at the time. So it took away that argument of cost efficiency altogether, and that sparked me to do my own research, and that's what people should do, by the way. Just research things on their own and really compare these things. Just don't listen to people's platitudes and their own their own thoughts and feelings about things. Do your own research about it. There's plenty out there, and Dave's information is a good start. If you read Tax-Free Income for Life, or listen to it on Audible, whatever your method is, it really spells it out well. It's a really good resource. I give out these all the time.
Yeah, Mark, you mentioned, imagine even if your balance went down to zero, you're still getting that $40,000 per year for the rest of your life. Well, what tax-free income for life does says, what if you could situate that annuity within the tax-free bucket within your Roth IRA? Now, all of a sudden, you're receiving guaranteed lifetime income that's shielded from the impact of higher taxes down the road. Mark, annuities are such a fraught concept. There's a lot of controversy around it. But I tell people all the time, I say, if you don't like annuities, you certainly aren't going to like Social Security or that company pension you're planning on receiving, because all of those work by the exact same principles as annuities. So all you're doing with an annuity is you're setting up a private pension that's guaranteed to last as long as you do.
Yeah, and you're right. I think the Roth is the place to be. And in my opinion, for a lot of people, again, take this as education, not advice. But but you do have to be careful. All annuities aren't built the same. Some are very, very, so you can go from 0 fee to 6% plus in annual fees. So you've got to be very, very careful on which one you're choosing.